Guys and gals, I come bearing some pretty bad news because we have information today that the M1X MacBook Pros that we've all been waiting for might have been pushed back a little. So Nikkei Asia Review believes the M1X MacBook Pros will be going into production towards the second half of the year, and that basically means that we won't see these apparently till October or November. Now, I'm sure this is heart-shattering news for many of you, including me, but I want to be a beacon of hope, because while I do agree there is a small chance this story could be true, and I'll explain why, I do overall think that no, this will not be the case, and so let me explain why I think that, and so without further ado, make sure to like, subscribe, and join the Buttification Squad for the latest Apple news and rumours. And with that being said, let's just tuck in. Right, so let me get my theory as to why this could be true out of the way first, and that really begins with a small thing called COVID-19 and the unpredictable nature of this COVID mess. So simply put, Apple's had their fair share of issues when it comes to COVID and their supply chain. For example, the iPhone 12s were considerably pushed back because of the pandemic, and so I wouldn't be surprised if Apple's pushing back the MacBook Pros because of the same reason. Especially since we already know that Mini LED has had some supply constraints in the recent past because of COVID, and we know that of course these new redesigned MacBook Pros should be using Mini LED panels, and so again, that possibly could be playing into a factor as to why we're seeing a delay. Another smaller thing to note is that in recent times, Apple's always released their bigger MacBook refreshes towards the end of the year. For example, in 2020 we saw the M1 releases at November, we saw the 16-inch MacBook Pro in October, I believe, in 2019, and before that we had the October event in 2018 where we saw the redesigned MacBook Air. And so there is a small chance that Apple wants to follow that pattern and wants to release the redesigned MacBook Pros towards the end of the year as usual. Anyways, enough of me agreeing. Why don't we disagree with this leak and delve into the reasons why I don't think this will be the case? And that really begins with Nikkei Asia Review's report, because while a lot of us have assumed they're talking about the MacBook Pros, they don't specifically mention them. In fact, in their words, they say two new MacBook laptops that were supposed to go into production during May to June have now been pushed back towards the second half of the year. So as you can see, there's no clear mention of them being the MacBook Pros. In fact, there's another tidbit that's a little sus here, and that is the previous mass production schedule they mentioned, because they say these two laptops were supposed to go into production during May to June. And I don't think that makes a lot of sense based on what we know so far about the release schedule of the MacBook Pro. I mean, let's take Mark Gurman's information for example. He says the redesigned MacBook Pros should launch around mid-year, and I think a lot of you know what that means in the world of Apple, because mid-year is when we see WWDC happen, and so it just makes sense that what Mark Gurman really means is that we see the MacBook Pros launch at WWDC, which in itself is a pro developer-focused event, and so releasing a new MacBook Pro then does seem completely plausible to me. And so coming back to my main point, if Apple's plan was to launch the MacBook Pro at WWDC, which usually happens in June, then surely they won't put these laptops into mass production so late, because of course, ideally, they want these shipping either on the day or the week after the event, and if it's happening in June and mass production starts then you can see it makes totally no sense. Of course, there is a chance that Apple was planning to give us a preview of the MacBook Pros at the event and then maybe start shipping them towards July. But honestly, if I were to guess, I think Apple wants to release these as soon as possible, ideally on the day of the event, much like we saw with the M1 releases, because of course there are so many people out there waiting for these machines, and I'm sure it's affecting Apple's current sales with the rest of their Intel lineup, and so releasing these as soon as possible and having them ready on the day of the event does seem like the logical thing to do. Now do note, I'm not a mass production expert in any shape or form, and so I could be completely wrong about all the predictions and assumptions I just made, but thankfully there is some evidence out there that supports my theory, because Mark Gurman told us back in late 2020 that a 16-inch MacBook Pro is in production with Quanta Computer, and so if it's already in the early stages of production back in 2020, then yeah, I'm pretty sure it won't take Apple a full year to release these at the end of 2021. Especially since Mark Gurman told us the 16-inch was only slightly behind in production compared to the 13-inch M1 MacBooks that launched towards the end of the year, and so I'm pretty sure that we could see these as early as WWDC. And so the final remaining question is, what are the two other MacBooks that Nikkei Asia Review could be referring to? Well, possibly I think one of them could be the redesigned MacBook Air, because we've heard from Mark Gurman that at the end of the year, Apple's going to be launching a new MacBook Air with a thinner design that's also lighter, possibly MagSafe, and mini LED, and so this, I think, is one of the laptops Nikkei Asia Review could be referring to. So what about the last mysterious MacBook? Well, I think that could be a bigger MacBook Air, because we have heard some reports about a 15-inch MacBook Air in the works, and yes, I do remember Mark Gurman saying it could be scrapped in development, but hopefully Apple's changed their mind and they are going ahead and making a bigger MacBook Air, because I can see that being pretty popular for those who like the size of the 16-inch but don't need the performance or the power you get. However, my last wildcard option as to what this mysterious MacBook could be is maybe a resurrection of the 12-inch MacBook. So I'm mentioning this for two reasons. Number one, I really badly want to see a 12-inch MacBook powered by M1, because it would be perfect. The issue with the old 12-inch MacBook was purely because Intel was rubbish for, of course, the fanless enclosure of the 12-inch MacBook, and so giving it M1 would literally be perfect, because we've seen the performance of the M1 MacBook Air without a fan, and so imagine having all that power and performance in a body that's super compact, insanely thin, and just a beauty to behold. But number two, there was an abundance, and I mean an abundance of leaks suggesting the 12-inch MacBook would be the first Apple Silicon laptop to release at the end of 2020. And frankly, I was surprised it wasn't, because it just seems perfect as an entry-level MacBook. Imagine Apple giving it the power of M1, possibly at a starting price of just $800. I think that would be insanely popular, and so I do hope it's still happening and could release at the end of 2021. But tell me in the comments below, what do you think of this leak, and also what could be these two mysterious MacBooks that have been pushed back? Anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and join the Butterfication Squad for the latest Apple news and rumors. Check out the video in the iCard above about the iPad Pro 11-inch and how we have a case for the 2021 model. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.